Dave Rattigan here with Dale Lawrence, and welcome to Inside the Line, Real Stories by Real Cops. You can check us out at insidetheline.org, or you can email us at realstoriesbyrealcops@gmail.com. And please, if you like us, share us. We appreciate you. We appreciate you listening. The story for today is on Uvalde, Texas, small town, school shooting, 19 kids dead, 2 adults, or 2 teachers, and the shooter killed as well. Last Tuesday, May 24. A lot of conflicting information about this. Nothing funny about it, so we're going to be, usually we
on
try
our
to be
best
funny
behavior,
about these
Dave.
things. Yeah, this time we're going to be on our best behavior. But here's the thing, Dale, there was a lot of conflicting information about this. There's a lot of second guessing about this. Briefly, from what we know now, what happened?
So basically, Salvador Ramos, he's the killer. He's the deceased 18-year-old killer. He had some sort of possibly a domestic, or maybe he was just having some sort of a mental health issue, shoots his grandmother.
Yep.
Jumps into a truck, drives a few miles, crashes the truck, jumps out of the truck, shoots at a few Uvalde residents by a funeral home, goes into the schoolyard, 911 calls start coming in, man accident, man with a gun. The school resource officer, who wasn't necessarily in the area, responds to the school. He comes in on scene. The gunman hides in some area in the school, or not in the school, but outside of the school. The school resource officer approaches another individual thinking that person may be the shooter, but it was a teacher. A teacher at some point leaves the door unlocked propped open.
Yep.
The shooter goes in the school, starts shooting. Now from there's a whole different scenarios that are being thrown about.
Yep.
There's certain timelines, 11:30 to 12:30 to 1 o'clock. But we're just going to kind of get into the meat of how did it happen? Why did it happen? Why did the cops respond a certain way? And try to answer your questions, Dave, which I'm pretty sure that the average viewer who's not in law enforcement is going to have.
Yeah, we're gonna have listeners, Dale, not viewers.
Okay, viewers.
Or maybe somebody who stares at the computer going,
How can you view audio? You got to view video, but you can't view audio. All right, Dave, strike one for me today.
We should mention it's a little. We're recording at an earlier time than usual, and we're waiting for the coffee to kick in. The other thing, or let's get this, because you've got bona fides in this area. You're a trainer. You've done the training for how to react to school shootings and how to.
I have my own program, Active Shooter Identify, React, Prevent, which goes specifically to school shooting response and responses to shootings in hospitals, places of worship, businesses. It's all relatively the same. Unfortunately, in the school, the victims are typically younger kids who cannot defend themselves.
Yeah.
Like this situation.
This is an interesting case because supposedly Uvalde is a small town.
16,000.
Yeah. 16,000. And you said how many people in that force?
From what I read, there's around 40 sworn police officers. And then that department has a sub-department, if what I read is correct, that has specifically for the schools.
So 7 additional officers for the schools.
Somewhere around there. And a chief for the schools doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they need a chief of the school police when there's only 6 of them, but that's not even the issue here. Right. The issue is how they responded.
And here's the thing about this. They were trained. The doors locked automatically. There was a fence around the school. They just supposedly, at one account that I read said that they had training fairly recently. And obviously, when it was time to react, I mean, the cops' reaction is one of the big things in this story because according to different accounts that I read, 2 of them went in, they got shot at, they retreated back, they stayed outside for a long time. And that's 45 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes, different stories. They said people were calling with...
If we back up a little, let's just back up to the history of school shootings and the response that we are at now. Back in 1999, in April, Columbine, massive school shooting.
Yep.
They had all that on video, so you can see the whole video of what happened and how it went down. The big critique there and going forward from that was when there was shootings, mass shootings, school shootings, officers would arrive, they would secure the perimeter, and then they would wait for highly trained SWAT teams, ballistics, and assault rifles and smoke grenades. And then that highly trained group would go into a school and try to neutralize the attackers, who in most instances in schools are young kids. Now, after that, they found that that doesn't work because they were outside and people were getting killed. They were getting shot. People bled to death from their wounds that they might have survived. So after that, law enforcement came out with a new philosophy. I wouldn't say it's a policy because not everyone adopted it, but the philosophy is most active shooters complete the act within 5 minutes. Some do it in 3 minutes, some do it in 12 minutes. But the middle of the road is around 5 minutes, it's all over. So if you wait for a tactical team, could take a half hour, 45 minutes. Now the response is the first responding officer. It would be best if there was 2 responding officers, but the first responding officer in most jurisdictions is trained to go in and just go for it. Attack the attacker. That's a military tactic.
Yep.
Attack the attacker. All right? If you attack the attacker, then you have a better chance of winning that fight.
Yep.
If you try to wait out the attacker or outsmart the attacker, you just come at force with force. And unfortunately, in situations like that, yes, an officer could, in fact, lose his or her life going in to attack the attacker. But I hate to say it, but one officer killed is a lot better than 12 10-year-old kids killed.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And that's what you signed up for as a cop or even someone in the military or someone on a tactical team.
And then you get the human factor.
The human factor of fear. How do you react under stress, under pressure, knowing that your life is on the line? And that's where they're at today. I read an article in, I think, Al Jazeera.
Okay.
The headline was like, coward cops. They were calling the cops down in Texas cowards for not going in. Okay. But it's very easy as an outsider who's not in law enforcement or who never was in the military to say, hey, just go in. But cops are no different than anyone else. They have families.
Yeah.
They're not about being, they're not suicide bombers going in there knowing their life's going to end. They want to live just like anyone else. So when you're confronted with that, you never know how you're going to react. Right. You may think the biggest, baddest dude out there who's in the weight room all day, he looks the part of a military specialist, but under pressure, he or she may fold and they may crumble.
Give this scenario to you. You were in the military, you were in the Marines.
Yes.
I know that if you were in that situation, your feeling is if you were in that situation, you would go.
That's the feeling, yes.
But let's say you're a military guy, you're a former military, you're 54 years old. It's been 30-something years since you were in the military. You've got a family now. You've got, I guess, more to lose.
Absolutely,
Is that going to change things for even guys who are in the military, even guys who would have no second thought about doing it in a war situation? If they're in a civilian situation and they're the police, might they have?
You might think twice about rushing that door. Now, a 22-year-old cop who's not married, doesn't have any kids, and he's just out there doing his thing, or someone in the military, an 18-year-old kid, they're going to attack. They're going to go. They're going to go right at the attacker. People like that, I guess if you don't think you have a lot to lose, you're going to have more balls, and you're going to be more inclined to be brave. I guess that in comparison to me, who has a wife and kids that I think like me, and you got a couple of wives and a kid that likes you, would you go in? You'd think twice about it.
Right.
Regardless of the snenario.
I would. I mean, realistically, I hear people, I hear people all the time who I just charge right. It's like, I think about, well, what are the chances that it's a booby trap? What about they're luring cops into a trap to shoot them or whatever, which I think is I know the chief, whether or not he's taking responsibility or if he's making himself the scapegoat to take away from the pressure on his men. But I've met very few chiefs that would do that. They're more concerned about covering their own ass. That's going to be the chief of the school police department down in Texas, Pete Arredondo. He's the guy that was on scene who made the determination at some point
that it went from an active shooter situation, which in an active shooter situation, we already discussed, you rush the door and you just hope for the best and you hit force with force. That's an active shooter response. A hostage response is you wait back, you become tactical, you think of your approach, you try to determine where the person is, you wait for specialists to come in, you wait for negotiators to come in, you have robots that might enter the building and to kind of get a layout of where the person may be. In a hostage situation, many times the commanders on scene believe that time is in their favor, and then the more time they have, the more tactical they can be, the less hostages that may get killed when we attack, and the less amount of police officers who are on the SWAT team that could get injured.
Right.
But he made that's a huge mistake.
Right.
Because I think all the evidence prior to him coming on scene was, this is an active shooter. People don't go into schools and take hostages. They go in, at least historically, the past 20 years, they've all gone in and they've just shot until they had no ammo left. They've shot until they were neutralized by the cops, or they shot everyone, and then they committed suicide.
Right. And you said something interesting to me when we were talking about this yesterday, that the other reason, it was clear that the guy did some shooting when he arrived inside the classroom.
Absolutely.
And that was known. I have heard, or I've read in the New York Times, the story that I read has said that there was some shots could be heard from inside the school. That was coming from parents, not from anything from the police. I don't know if you read something differently.
I've heard parents say that while the cops were on scene and while the parents were out in front of the school, that this individual, the shooter, was still possibly shooting. If that's the case, then you already know it's still an active shooter situation.
And if it's not the case, as you pointed out, somebody could be bleeding out.
Absolutely.
And that's the other part of it, where it's not a hostage. This is somebody whose life is in your hands, and you've got to decide, if you're the cop, do you risk your own life to save this life? And you don't even, you don't know if anybody's alive.
I think the public's perception right now is that they made a tactical mistake, that he's either incompetent, possibly incompetent, highly incompetent, possibly. He was in a position where he wasn't trained well enough. He's in a small town, and now he's dealing with a complete shit show that he's never had experience in. And he took control of the situation, and maybe his arrogance kind of put people in a bad place, and he was unwilling to listen to some of the tactical teams that showed up.
And we should mention, by the way, that this wasn't resolved until the Border Patrol showed up.
Yes.
And they took over.
Yes.
And they killed the shooter.
Well, they have a tactical team, obviously.
Yeah.
I would assume the part of the country they're in, they're probably highly skilled. Obviously, they're highly skilled. Because I'm sure they've done a lot of entries for drugs and smuggling and all sorts of stuff going on down there. So they're probably working real time once a week, 3 or 4 times a month. So those are the guys you want. Very experienced, gung-ho, energetic guys who are going to put their life on the line. And they might have been held back. And if they were held back, then there's really no excuse for that.
One of the interesting things about this is there's so much information that comes to us from so many different directions. A lot of it's false. I don't think a lot of it's necessarily, fake news for the sake of disinformation. I just think it's fake because somebody gets excited and they write something and they're loose with the facts. Like, I don't know if I can't remember his name, but there was somebody from the Border Patrol who was getting his hair cut.
Yes.
He picked up the shotgun from the barber because he didn't have anything with him because he was off duty, and he went to the scene and he tried to help at the scene.
His name is Jacob Alvarado, and he was in a barber shop. He gets a text from his wife, who's a teacher there. His daughter is a student there.
Yep.
He grabs the barber's shotgun, because you're in Texas, baby, and everyone's got a shotgun. And he shows up at the scene, and he knows what part of the school his daughter is in.
Yep.
He knows, or he believes, the shooter is in another part of the school. So him and 3 or 4 officers.
Yep. 4. But what I read was they had 2 guys with guns covering the rear, and 3 officers, or the 3 officers finding and leading the kids out to safety. So, but what I read was he was the one who killed the shooter.
No, he wasn't the one. He was not the one. His members of the Border Patrol, probably his unit or guys that obviously he knows, were the ones that came in and killed the guy.
So, but that's an example of. Now, the other stuff, here are some of the other things that we're hearing about. And some of these we're seeing on video, so we know that they're accurate because everyone's got a cell phone video. We don't have to listen to the police.
Yeah, you can't hide anything nowadays.
Well, this is one of the other things, because frequently the official narrative, and this is why the official narrative has been so inconsistent, the official narrative might come from cops, the police. The cops may feel like maybe they don't know, or maybe they're covering somebody's butt, but maybe their narrative was not, the official narrative when it came out is different than the narrative that we're getting now. And there's a lot of stuff that's coming out, including the fact that I heard parents were tased. I don't think parents were tased. Were they tased?
I believe, according to reports, there was a mother who was handcuffed, subsequently unhandcuffed, and allegedly she went into the school and grabbed her daughter. There are some pictures of officers who had their tasers out of their holster.
Yep.
I believe that the officers who confronted that situation, and I think any parent that showed up at a school
is going to want to go in,
knowing or at least hearing gunfire and watching 20, 30, 40, 50 cops just laying back is going to want to go into that school. So the cops at some point had to control that group of people, highly emotional group of people, to prevent them from going in and possibly getting shot, which makes the situation worse.
Yeah.
But then again, you have to feel for them, because if the cops aren't doing what they believe they should be doing, then any parent instinctively would go after their kid to get their own kid out of there.
And there were stories about cops. Some cops were going in, getting their own kids and bringing them out.
Yep.
That sounds a little weird to me, that you would go out and get, you would go out and get your kid and leave the other 20 kids in the classroom.
I always ran that scenario in my head when my kids were in high school. And I always said to myself, half of my brain process was, I'm going to text my son or daughter, what classroom are you in? And I'm coming for you.
Yeah.
That's my instinct.
Yeah.
But knowing that could put a lot of other people at jeopardy, because you could direct fire to me coming in, and then that shooter starts to move toward me, and then I bring him, the shooter, into a situation where there's potentially more victims.
And the other thing is, if you're sheltering in place and knock, knock, knock.
If people have used the ruse, it's a cop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shooters have used that ruse. Hey, it's the police. Let me in.
Yeah.
And then if they let him in, now he's going to start shooting. So that's not going to work either.
Okay. If they're trained well. I mean,
if the kid's trained well or the cop?
The teacher. If the teacher is trained well, he or she
will not open that door.
Might not open that door.
Absolutely not.
On the other hand, they might say yes. I mean, so this is all stems from, first, the cops make what you believe was a tactical error, but not rush the shooter. And that creates all these other problems of the cops now have to hold the parents back. Parents are going willy-nilly individually into the school to get their own kids out. Could have been a lot worse if that if the shooter had started shooting at them.
And it all goes back to human. Cops are human, just like anyone else. So they're going to make mistakes. Their emotions are going to overtake them. And if that emotion is fear and it overtakes them and now the cops panic, you can't have the cops panic. You can be afraid as a cop, but if you're a cop and you panic, that situation is going to go bad really quick, which it did. So I'm thinking at some point, someone in charge panicked. And as a leader, whether it be in the military, whether it be a political leader, whatever the case may be, in this case, law enforcement leader, you cannot panic. You have to remain calm under pressure, and you have to be prepared to send your men into a potentially deadly situation to at least stop the killing at some point. So you might know you're going to lose one of your guys. One
of the things that I read, and I read it more than once, of course, this is on social media, so it's all opinions from people with no background or different backgrounds. Some have said that the rank and file should have disobeyed the orders. Yes or no? I mean, cops are trained to follow orders.
That's the paramilitary effect.
Yeah.
Let's bring it from the military perspective. In a situation like that, if you're talking, this is a Marine Corps unit and they're attacking a Russian unit.
Yep.
Could happen in a couple of months. And the commander of a unit tells the men to either stand back or stand down and let's regroup. But you have some renegade nut who runs out there. Now he puts everyone else in the unit at risk. So in the military, that's not a good idea because you're talking about large groups of soldiers and Marines who could be victimized by a renegade Marine who just is acting obviously out of panic, and he's just saying, fuck it, I'm going at him, baby. Give me the Medal of Honor if I survive.
Yeah.
But in a police situation, it's a little different because it's smaller groups. A lot of times the leadership you have in law enforcement isn't even remotely as effective or trained as they are in the military. So if I was in that situation, if you ask me this, if I was in that situation and I had a group of people that believed the way I believed, like, fuck this guy, he's a nitwit, he's a local town cop, he's a nitwit, we're the Border Patrol, this is what we do, this is how we train, we have everything we need, fuck them, we're going in. And just see what happens. I think that's probably what they did.
Right. I think that when the Border Patrol gets there, do they just take over? Is that a jurisdictional thing?
Usually, we did this in the Barney Fife special, where these small town cops. I think what typically is done is you want to give whoever's jurisdiction is in charge, whether it's a small town, a medium town, whatever the case may be, state and federal agents come in, they want to defer to the commander on scene, regardless of who that person is, and they want to work together and use their heads and come up with a plan. However, I've seen this. If the commander on scene is incompetent, then someone, whether from an outside agency, is going to walk in there, because I've seen it firsthand, and say, you back off. This is what we do. We got it. You guys can come with us, work with us, but I'm making the shots. I'm calling the shots right now. You ain't got time to argue with people, because people's lives are in danger if you make a wrong decision based on being either incompetent or not being trained enough.
Right. And these guys, according to what I read, they just had training like within the last 6 months. So these guys from Uvalde, the police department, they're getting just destroyed on social media and in regular media. And basically they're just getting destroyed. The most traumatic thing in the world probably is to lose your child in a school shooting. It might be like at the top of the list of things that horrible things that can happen to people. I don't know any parent that would rather die themselves than have somebody else.
Yeah, knowing that your child is probably deathly afraid, could be injured. The last thing they're probably thinking about, where's my daddy or where's my mommy? Because the parents have always said, I'll come get you if something's bad. So these little 10-year-old kids are believing that, and the parents can't convince the cops to go in. And even the parents can't go in.
Right. And even if they come in and they like your typical school shooting, they just go in and they just, wipe everybody out in 3 minutes. It's still horrible trauma. But then combined with, and again, the teacher who propped the door up.
Because it goes back to physical security. Physical security is only as good as the person who's in charge of locking the door.
And she's or he or she, whoever it is who did it, or they, whoever did it, they probably thought, nobody's going to come. I mean, no matter, you put these things in place, but the human factor is locks on every door is a pain in the butt. You're in an elementary school, teachers go out to clean the erasers or send kids out to clean the erasers. They send kids out for recess. They don't want to have to go around the building to get back in.
Yeah, that's what it is. It was a convenience thing, especially if you're tactical and you're a security safe school. There's only going to be a few entrances, and most of the side doors, if not all side entries, are going to be only open from the inside. So you prop it open, saves yourself a 5-minute walk in the sweltering heat. But unfortunately, and there's always those situations, you can do something right 1,000 times, but it's at one time where things just go bad. And I understand.
Or I'll give you another scenario. Maybe she props the door every single day.
And nothing ever happens.
And nothing ever happens. And this was the once in a lifetime.
It's like that joke, Dave. You say that joke every Friday, and once in a while it just doesn't work. But back to the cops, I'm sure the cops in that town are being brutalized in the papers, on social media, walking down the street. But I'm also pretty confident that there's probably a good percentage of the guys who really did heroic actions at that moment. They're just not being recognized for it. And it's probably one or two actions of some of the commanders on scene that is making the whole department look incompetent. I don't believe the whole department's incompetent. I believe that there was probably a few individuals who are in charge.
But they've all got to live with it.
They've all got to
live with it. And if this is a typical small town police department, a lot of these people live in the community. And how do you continue to operate?
I don't know that you can. I don't know what's going to happen down there. There's probably no respect blanket across the board for police departments down there.
And how do you get a job with another department?
Because you say you can, on your resume, former officer of Uvalde PD.
Right. And they say, and then in the interview they say, "Were you there?" And you say, "Nope,
called out sick that day."
Yeah. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, these guys, even if this was their moment of truth and they failed, it's still horrible for all of these people's lives. Worse, obviously, for the parents and the kids. But is there any kind of a way that trainers can determine whether or not the people who are trained are going to act the way they're trained when the heat is on?
I think it's difficult because I've trained boxers before, and you can train them in the gym, and they look good, and they're in shape. But the minute they get hit, or the minute that they're hurt, or they're not in control, and they're backed into a corner, their true instinct will come out. And if they're a fighter, they'll bite down on their mouthpiece, and they'll come right at you. If they're not a fighter at heart, which I wasn't a fighter at heart. My coach told me that. He goes, "You don't like to hurt people, do you?" I go, "No, I don't. So you better find another career." Then in those situations, you're not going to respond at a level that's going to be effective. And that's the same thing in sports. It's probably the same thing in comedy, right? You go out there, you bomb 3 or 4 nights in a row, and you're like, fuck it, I'm done.
But actually, it's one time. If you come back after you bomb, if you really bomb hard and you come back, that means you're going to be a comedian.
Yeah.
Or at least you get a chance. But a lot of guys, they have that, or a lot of comedians, they have that one set where they just really bomb and you never see them again.
Yeah, so I think it's hard to see that in people because training is controlled, and any fear that you're going to have in training really isn't going to be there. And how do you react under fear? Do you panic, or does that fear pump you up, give you a good adrenaline dump, and you're like, fuck it, I'm going in, have a nice life. If this is the day it's going to end, this is the day it's going to end. But God damn it, I want to save those kids. If you're that type of person, then that's exactly what you're going to do.
You know, there are people who are going to say, in fact, they're already saying it. I've seen this on social media where I mean, first of all, whenever there's a school shooting, there's an immediate.
Everyone knows how to do it better.
Oh yeah,
everyone can do it better than the cops.
It's on the one side, it's gun control, which again, I don't disagree that there should be better gun. I personally don't disagree, but I also find it frustrating that we can't even have the conversation because the gun lobby is so strong in this country that we can't even have the conversation about what's actually causing these school shootings because we can't talk about guns because the gun lobby is so strong. That's on the one side. The other side
is the mental health.
It's the mental health. It's the video games. It's the violence in our culture. It's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. There are some who are saying, well, we need more security at schools, or some saying we need to arm the teachers. I'm hearing now that you only hear about these during an election year because the Democrats want to be elected, as if for some reason the Democrats are in charge of school shootings now. That's absurd. False flag operations. I've heard that. I heard that about Sandy Hook.
Well, that's insane. That whole conspiracy that they have going on with that.
It's amazing. So let's go back to this one. Let's go back to gun control. Is gun control, as a cop, I mean, the majority of cops that I talk to will say, when I ask them about gun control, they'll say they don't favor taking away the right to buy guns, but why does anybody need a semi-automatic weapon?
Yeah, I think if you're a hunter or a sport shooter, then yeah, you shouldn't necessarily need those type of weapons. Is it your constitutional right to have them? Some people will say, yeah, it's right there. It's your right. I don't believe that by controlling assault rifles that it's going to have any effect on a school shooter. Because if you can get a pistol, if you can get a revolver, If you can get a car and you can drive into the school when they're out at recess,
We've seen it. We've
seen that happen.
Yeah.
Can you grab a knife and just, if you're really out of your mind and you're really motivated to kill people, can you just go in there with a knife or a machete or something like that and start stabbing people? If you want to kill someone, yes, a gun is the easiest way to kill as many people within a short period of time. But if you're really psychotic and you're really hell-bent on murder, on homicide, then you will do it whatever cost and with whatever weapon you have available to you.
If the difference there in Uvalde is instead of 21 people being murdered,
you might have
10 people are murdered?
You might have, yes, that's a possibility.
I've had cops on the other side of this. I talk to cops. If I'm doing a fundraiser, there are a lot of cops at fundraisers. That's really where I've had most of these conversations. But I've talked, just other times I've talked to cops on the street, and I ask them. Most of them say that same thing about the semi-automatic weapon. But I have talked to a DEA officer, and he said, I don't think it would make a difference at all because there were so many cops. So many guns.
There's so many guns that are already out there.
Right. So
there's a lot of research out there that will tell you that they've tried gun control years ago, and the murders were still the same as they were 10 years prior, as actually, 10 years after. So
I saw this on social media, and they said there was another stat about it on social media, and they said, according to this stat, there was a ban for 4 or 8 years, something like that, and the numbers went down, and now they're back up again. So if it's not gun control, if gun control is not the answer for this, what is the answer?
What the bottom line is, and we can probably wrap it on this.
Yep.
The bottom line is you can have all the training, train the cops, train the teachers, train the kids. But if there's a physical security breakdown, then a motivated killer, whether it be in a school or a business or a place of worship, will get in. So that breakdown, can't control that. Yeah. Human error. The next thing, cops. You can train the cops. However, you can't force a cop or a group of cops, if they panic under pressure, to go into a building, regardless of how many people are yelling and screaming at you, regardless of what the commander is saying, because if they freeze under pressure and they do not follow or believe in their training, they will be ineffective. Can't control that. Now, the mental health component. A lot of these shooters have, not all, but a lot of them have mental health history. They're loners, they're violent, and they've made threats before on social media. Law enforcement can't keep up with that. Social media monitors can't keep up with that. But God forbid you say Kamala Harris is an asshole. They're going to kick you off Facebook. But if you make threats to kill, no one's going to see that.
You know something? Yes. I get suspended from Facebook.
They might kick us off the podcast when it goes up to iHeartRadio this afternoon, Dave. Did he say Kamala Harris is an asshole?
They're going to get us knocked off. I got suspended from social media. All I did was threaten to murder a friend of mine. And it was joking. It was a trope from the 1970s murder mysteries. Anybody knew that. He knew I was kidding. Yeah. Anybody who read it would have known I was kidding, except for the computer or computer-like personality from Facebook that read it.
Yeah, so the mental health thing is mental health is looked upon as throwaways, meaning they come into a hospital having some sort of a mental health issue. They try to tweak their meds. They put them in a room, give them a nice meal, calm them down for a day or two, throw them back on the streets, throw them back into bad situations. There's very few services. The system is overwhelmed. So many of these individuals who potentially can do harm, and this kid, Salvador Ramos, by all accounts, had some severe mental health issues. Also, the kid up in Buffalo, New York, a few weeks ago, severe mental health issues, and they slip through the system because the system is overwhelmed, and ultimately people in the system look upon them as throwaway victims. No one cares, and they roll the dice with people like that. And when people like that roll the dice, then the bad guy decides to go out and do something, everyone starts pointing the finger. It's your fault, blame the cops, blame the schools, blame the doctor, blame the politicians, and ultimately, a couple of weeks later, a couple of months later, there'll be another school shooting. There'll be another maniac with mental health issues who goes out and does something. There'll be another maniac with no mental health issues. You never could have predicted him or her would do anything, and they do it.
Right.
There's always going to be people out there who are going to fuck your day up, Dave. No matter what's going on, there'll always be someone out there. So ultimately it comes to you. Remain vigilant and take matters into your own hands. And if you're in a situation, then don't rely on the cops. Don't rely on anyone but yourself. That's a part of the training that we do. When I do my training, I usually end it with this. Your safety is in your own hands. You cannot rely on cops. You cannot rely on your mommy or daddy. You can't rely on the guy next to you. You can't rely on anyone other than the person you see in the mirror every day. Take responsibility and fight to the end, brother. That's it.
That's it. This has been Inside the Line. Real stories by real cops. I'm Dave. That's Dale. Please share. Thanks for listening. See you next time.